What's up, everybody? It's your boy Khaled, aka Bearish Bully. Alright, so look, in this video we're going to do two different things. We're going to talk about first, obviously, Tesla's chart analysis. So we're going to go over what happened on Friday or last week, which I pretty much told you guys in my last two videos, and it played out to the T. Alright, so we'll talk about what I'm looking for tomorrow when the market opens, and how I'm going to trade it. But I'm also going to talk about Elon Musk's interview. All right, things that he covered. I really should have muted my phone, so let me go ahead and do that. All right, phone's muted. So once again, we're going to talk about the charts, but then we're also going to talk about Elon Musk's interview with Peter Diamandis. Hopefully I pronounced that right. He's with XPRIZE, and they're coming up with ways to eliminate or go carbon negative, not carbon neutral, carbon negative. So remove all the carbon from the air, from the atmosphere. So we're going to touch base on that. What I did was, the interview was really long. It was just a little over an hour long. So I recorded bits and pieces which I felt were relevant, and I'm going to explain why I think those are relevant to Tesla and its price action going forward. Well, at least in the months to come. All right, so before we get into that, let's just go ahead and talk about the chart. You know what, if you haven't already, just go ahead and hit the like button before we get started, because this video took a while to put together. All right, so I'd really appreciate it. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, so let's get into this. Now, on the 5-minute chart, I'm using a 5-minute chart just to show you guys a few more days rather than a minute, because we already know what happened on Friday. There was a gap. There was actually two gaps, and I said it in my last video that I love trading gaps. It's just like a vacuum, you know, it just pulls the stock right down towards it, or it'll pull it up towards it. So it's an area where there hasn't been any price action, and charts do not like areas that have no price action. So based on that, I was shorting Tesla, obviously, but you can see here that a few things came into play, which is why I changed my thesis. Now, not only do I look for the fact that there's a gap, not only do I pay attention to the moving averages, but there's also the volume, there's also the trend lines, all right, levels of resistance and support. So you got to put all those things together to come up with your thesis on where you think the stock is going to go. All right, so for me, like I said it, I felt that Tesla was going to be going down. Like, I thought there was still a lot more downside to come. It was trading in between a certain range. So here's what happened. It did come all the way back down. It did retest. Now on the 5-minute chart, you can see it here pretty clearly. But let's go ahead and just look at the 1-year daily. Now I do have one trend line here, and you can see it bounced perfectly way back when. So this was March 5th. It came down here. It tested it, jumped up, came right back down, retested it, kind of came a little bit below, but not enough. So the bull still had control of that. So once it hit this, it bounced back up again. Now, here is where it gapped up, came back to fill the gap, but it only filled it about halfway. So I knew that the gap should have been filled up a little bit more. But either way, it still ran up. Now, on the year or the daily chart, you can see here that you've got the 200-day moving average all the way down here. You've got the 20-day and you've got the 50-day. Once it broke through the 50-day, it was obvious it's going to go back up to refill this gap. So as soon as it did, that was it. It ran out of gas and it came down hard. So I figured it was just going to be a gap fill, but now we have a perfect triangle that's in place. So we're trying to figure out where it's going to go. All right, now it came back down. It held on the 50. It also held on the 20, but now it broke through the 20. It broke through the 50. And that's how it was pretty obvious that it's going to be coming back down here to fill the gap. All right, so it retested on the same trend line, bounced off of it perfectly, and it also came back to kind of fill up the rest of the gap. Gap was filled. I knew it was time to go long because the volume was coming in really hard. Once it did hit that trend line, once it did fill up most of that gap, it was a clear sign that it's time to flip the script. It is time to flip the script and change my thesis from a short play to a long play. And that's what happened. All right, and then you can also see here on the 20-day chart. And now my 20-day charts are probably my favorite charts to use, just because it'll give you a little bit more. If you're trying to look at something really quick, like how to play something really fast, like for the next 5 minutes, use a minute chart, use a 5-minute chart. But if you want to see something for like a day trade, like a full day swing, go with a 20-day. It'll give you a better idea of what's going to happen. All right, so you can see here a few things happen. One, it was way below the 20-day moving average. It bounced off of the trend line. It filled the gap. With all three of those in play, it's a pretty obvious sign that it's going to make a run back to the upside. Now, aside from that, you had an oversold reading on your RSI. Clear sign, if you add that to everything else, that it should run up. Secondly, you have massive green volume coming in. Another sign. So you have all these things, all these indicators that are telling you it's going to be a bull run. And it did. Once it broke above the 20-day moving average, if you held, which would have been a good thing to do, then you had a good day. So you can see here, it broke through the 20, it broke through the 50, it kind of bounced, well, it kind of got rejected on the 200, but it's also because if we zoom in here, you'll see it also hit the top of the trend line. So zooming back out, there's a massive triangle here, okay, a massive triangle, or you could say it's a rising wedge. But no, you know what? It's a triangle. It's not a rising wedge. So yeah, you have this massive triangle here. Okay, so it got rejected off the top, but it came back and broke through it. So now what I want to see on Monday, is it going to hold above that trend line, or is it going to come crashing down? So I think, as you can see here, if I zoom out a little more, I have another trend line up here. All right, so I have two different trend lines set up. My reasons are, one is going based off of the candle body, and one is going based off of the candle wicks. So obviously the candle bodies is right here on this trend line, this white trend line going down, and you'll see that it did reject off of it, and then it kind of broke through, and now it's just hovering above. So this other one, it just touches the top of the wick here, and these top wicks kind of go through it. So it might be out of play, but who knows? We're gonna find out come Monday if that is gonna be validated. Now you also have this level of resistance, so we want to see if it's going to come up here, break through this trend line, or if it's still going to be a resistance play, or hopefully it turns into support. I hope it turns into support, but we'll just see what happens. All right, so now you still have the 20-day here, which crossed through the 50. It's holding on to 200. We need that 200 to hold. If not, I still feel that there may be some more downside. And here is my reason why. I'm still very bullish on Tesla, but I just feel in the short term, if there is a pullback, well, here are the reasons. All right, so on a daily chart or the 1-year chart, now you guys know my favorite pattern is 20, 50, 200. That means the stock is going to rip up. In this case, you have 20, 50, 200. So it's in reverse. Now we need massive bull volume. You can see here we had pretty good bull volume on Friday. If that continues, then we can push up, because the candle did slightly break above the 20-day moving average, but it didn't hold, right? So we need to make sure that tomorrow it stays above that 20-day moving average. If it does pull back, look for a pullback down here to about 686. I think by Monday it'll probably be around 687 or 689 for the 50-day. So that'll be the next level of support to look for if it does come down. All right, but we want it to hold on the 20-day moving average. All right, so my idea is it may still come down a bit, which is why I'm holding a very small position. I got 15 shares of Tesla short, so this way if it does come down, then at least I'm ahead of the game before the market opens. All right, and if it does go up, I don't think it's going to gap up too big on Monday, because there's still a lot of negative press. People are trying to push the stock down, and yeah, so I don't really think it's going to be opening up that high. All right, but we'll see what happens on Monday. So that's my plan. That's what I'm looking to do. Always do your own due diligence. You might think that I'm batshit crazy and this chart is my chart analysis is wrong, but hey, it served me right, so I'm sticking with it. All right, but always do your own due diligence. Don't just trade something because I'm telling you guys to do it. That's not how it works. All right, now let's go into the interview that happened with Elon Musk and Peter Diamandis. I hope I'm pronouncing that, with XPRIZE. All right, and also I will be putting timestamps in the description below to talk about the different things, or at least to title the different parts of the video where Elon is talking about what subject. And the reason why I think this is going to have a massive impact on Tesla stock is because Elon Musk has a lot of different companies. It's not just Tesla, it's not just SpaceX, it's not just his boring company, it's not the Hyperloop and, well, all those other companies, they're not publicly traded. If you guys notice something, when SpaceX had some news come out, what happened? The very next day, Tesla skyrocketed. Why is that? Because people want to invest in SpaceX, but they can't because it's not publicly traded. So because it's Elon and SpaceX is Elon's, Tesla is Elon's, the boring company is Elon's, Hyperloop is Elon, anything that has to do with any of those other companies, when it's good news, it's good publicity for Elon Musk. It doesn't necessarily have to be for Tesla, but because Tesla, if people want to invest in Elon, they're going to invest in Tesla, and they're going to feel that it has something to do with all his other companies, which in a sense it does. So that's why I feel with all the good news and the good press that's coming out with all his other companies, it's only going to show in the stock price for Tesla. So that's why I feel that I'm extremely bullish on Tesla long term. Short term, yeah, obviously I feel there will be a little bit more choppy or a pullback in the Tesla stock. But overall, long term, extremely bullish. I do feel that this will be hitting 900 again. Don't quote me on this, but I will say by end of May or early June, we should be back up to the $850 to $900 range. All right, but obviously closer near term, I do think there will be a little bit more of a pullback, and then of course just a massive run up once we find a good solid level of consolidation, support, and then it's just off to the moon from there. All right, so let's get into the video.
Our goal is like basically to do something that have it be sort of interesting, fun, and ultimately useful, and to spur creative ideas for what is actually the smartest way to take the trillions of tons of carbon that we've removed from the ground and will remove from the ground, from deep underground, and we've placed that carbon in the atmosphere and oceans, which obviously changes the chemical constituency of the surface of the Earth. And since we know that long term we're going to have renewable energy anyway, because we'll run out of oil and gas. It's not going to last forever. So we know where this ends up. This has to end up with renewable, sustainable energy. It's tautological. It's really just a question of, do we try to get there sooner or later? And we should try to get there sooner. It's obvious. Why run the? How long do you want to run this experiment?
Yeah, it's also true that even if we stopped CO2 production, that's probably still not enough. That we do need mechanisms for extraction of CO2 from the atmosphere and the oceans that don't exist right now.
As I said, I am. People sometimes think I'm sort of like. I'm kind of in the middle of the spectrum. I think if we stopped CO2 production today, which obviously we could not do without civilization coming to a grinding halt, and mass starvation and all sorts of terrible things happening. So we could not stop CO2 generation today. But I think at the the sort of 400, possibly even 500 ppm level, I think it's probably okay. But if as the world industrializes and we're sort of at 8 billion people, get to 9 billion people, have a lot more industrial output per person, you could see the at what might be okay at sort of 400 or 500 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere might become quite dire at 1,000.
Yep.
And the trend is certainly in that direction if we don't do anything about it. So that's why I think it's just probably an unwise experiment to run. Even if you think that this is why I think it should be a compelling argument to even those who would assign a low probability to increased CO2 causing problems. Like, let's say you think it's 99.9% likely that that adding all the CO2 to the ocean's atmosphere is going to be fine. So you're saying there's a 0.1% chance of disaster. Well, there's only one. So right now we only got one planet. Well, even a 0.1% chance of disaster, why run that risk? That's crazy. So, so I think what's likely to play out is that we will continue to add a lot more CO2 to the ocean's atmosphere, and also, ocean acidification, as you know, is also an issue. It's you don't want to sort of add carbonic acid to the oceans and change the pH level because it destroys reefs and all that. So,
which it's actively doing right now as we're watching.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So the multiplanetary, and right now the only way to do that is with rockets that do burn fuel. But we do have a long-term plan for sustainability of even rocket flights by generating propellant using sustainable energy, wind and solar, to generate, starting first with liquid oxygen. And for our Starship vehicle, it's almost 80% liquid oxygen and 20% liquid methane. The oxygen, it's obviously pretty easy to create that. You just use wind and solar electricity, and you do air separator because you've got the oxygen already in the air. The plants are making the oxygen, so you can just use electricity, basically renewable electricity, to create 80% of the propellant on the rocket. And then for the remaining 20%, you can use the Sabatier process, where you actually take CO2 out of the atmosphere and you combine that with water to create CH4 and more O2.
Yep.
And that's in fact what we would do on Mars.
Sure.
To generate propellant.
Sure.
So there is a long-term plan for sustainable generation of propellant for the rockets. I do want to emphasize that. And if there's some other way to do that now, we certainly would.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to sort of address this apparent inconsistency in if generating carbon is bad, why are you doing that with rockets?
Yeah.
It's not. It's just one of the other criticisms. Sometimes feels like, oh, is this some escape hatch for rich people? No, they think it's like, so. Going to Mars reads like that ad for Shackleton going to the Antarctic. It's dangerous, it's uncomfortable, it's a long journey. You might not, come back alive, but it's a glorious adventure, and it'll be amazing. An amazing experience. And
your name will go in history.
Yes, you might die. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and you probably won't have good food, and all these things, So if an arduous and dangerous journey where you may not come back alive, but it's a glorious adventure, sounds appealing,
and
Mars is the place.
And you still have thousands of volunteers, if not millions of volunteers, who would want to go.
I mean, honestly, a bunch of people probably will die in the beginning. It's tough sledding over there.
We're an exploring species.
Yeah, exactly. Not for everyone. We don't want to make anyone go, so it's like it's volunteers only.
An update on Starship, because that's what Starship's taking us to the moon, taking us to Mars.
That's the goal.
It is audacious. Can you compare it to the Apollo?
It is audacious, yes.
Compare it to the Apollo vehicle, the Saturn V, for comparison for a second, for folks to get a sense of it.
Sure. Well, I think the thing that's least obvious from when it's on the ground, from the videos and pictures, is the size of it. So, it's going to be the largest flying object ever. So it'll be twice the thrust and weight of the Saturn V.
Amazing.
So that's just from a side, and taller. So including the launch escape tower. So it's a very tall rocket. 120 meters tall.
And because it's so wide, the proportions obscure that fact, how big it is.
Yeah, you can see in some of the pictures that have been released when it's landing on the moon, and the people look like ants. It's a big rocket. This rocket is capable of at least 100 tons and probably closer to 200 tons of useful payload to the surface of the moon. So we're designing it to be far in excess of NASA's requirements.
Yeah.
And so it's really intended to be something that that can enable a permanently occupied base on the moon. So we've got obviously permanently occupied base in Antarctica, and it would be great to have one on the moon as well.
Yeah.
And you can do I think a lot more research if you have the scientists actually there. And we could have some very powerful telescopes.
No, it's the moon. There's some great sayings from Robert Heinlein that said if God had wanted humanity to have space flight, they would have she would have given us a moon.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the point is that the ship will come back and land right by the tower, and be placed right back on. And so,
like a 767, just refuel and go.
It's intended to be such that the booster can be used, I don't know, a dozen times a day, and the ship. Wow. The ship could be basically every couple of hours, and that's mostly about reloading propellant and mounting the ship, and then the ship could probably be used, probably in theory every 3 hours if you can make the ground track match. But certainly every, say, 6 to 9 hours, or call it twice a day for the ship. And we'll make more ships than there are boosters. So, and I think once we have the floating space platforms, we can position them such that the ship can come back in a single orbit.
Amazing.
So then it could be like, let's say if we can get 3 ship launches per day, that's 1,000 flights a year. Each with 100 to 150 tons of payload.
Now we're talking a real space program. So Elon, this is the largest prize ever, largest incentive prize ever, and I would argue for one of the most largest civilization scale challenges we have.
Sure.
And we're going to get into the rules in a second so that folks who are looking at creating teams can understand why we created those rules. But why did you fund this? Let's start with the why there.
Yeah, I think I wanted to spur ideas and thinking about the long-term need to capture carbon. I think this is one of those things that's going to take a while to figure out what the right solution is. And especially to figure out what the best economics are for CO2 removal, and all the think through all the consequences. You don't want the cure to be worse than the disease.
Yeah.
Sometimes people say, "Well, just plant a bunch of trees." I'm like, that's not so easy. Like
a trillion trees.
Sure, exactly. And then you got to okay, well, you need to get fertilizer. You're going to water them. Where's the water going to come from? What habitat are you potentially destroying where the trees used to be? It's not just a no-brainer of just go plant a bunch of trees.
But it's not to say that's not a good, viable option.
We should plant some trees. I'm in favor of planting trees. It's just not a question of okay, there are vast sections of like the Sahara Desert or some large barren areas, very dry areas in the U.S. Where you could in theory plant a lot of trees, but you're going to need a lot of water. Yeah. And you're going to need you're going to have to cultivate them. It's not like they don't just throw some seeds on the ground.
We'll drop them from orbit.
Yeah, and I mean, so I think it'd be good to sort of kind of frame the debate and understand, okay, what things are really going to move the needle? How much are they going to move the needle? If we're talking about getting tens or hundreds of billions of tons of carbon, in what form will that carbon be?
Yeah.
And, will it be stable over time? And like I said, what is it going to cost humanity to do? However it's paid for.
So let's talk about the prizes that are up for grabs. First place is going to be 50 million.
Yeah.
Which is significant. Our hope is that it's going to attract enough cognitive surplus out there to focus in on this.
Yeah.
30 million split between sort of a second, third, and fourth place prize. And one of the things that you and your team put forward is maybe it might be split into different categories,
sure.
Right? Different approaches.
Yeah, I mean, we want to reward people who have done great work.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I'm open to increasing the prize size too over time. So if it turns out like, hey, somebody really kicked ass, and somehow there's not a prize for them, I'll add some more to the prize.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want somebody to have spent massive blood, sweat, and tears, have done something useful, and then get nothing for it. That would be pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, but I think also you know, this somebody's going to probably get a company out of this, you know, because I think this will be a need long term, and you know, so so this is kind of like, you can also think of it as like, you know, free venture money.
Yeah.
You know,
non-dilutive venture capital.
Yeah.
And
Free money for a company.
And hopefully we're also creating a massive marketplace and proving to people that there's a there here.
Yeah.
So 50 million for the first, 30 million split among second, third, and fourth. In the next year, we're taking $15 million and distributing $1 million to the top 15 teams that appear to be making the most progress and the most real.
Just giving some people some seed money, basically. Yeah.
And then you've set aside $5 million for student teams.
Yeah,
which is real important. You want to talk about student teams? I know you're passionate about that.
Yeah. We've done a lot of student competitions, for example, Hyperloop. Just trying to you know, spur ideas in advanced transportation. And it's really just basically an electric car and a vacuum tube, to be precise. I mean, and we've had several of them, and you know, the last Hyperloop competition, I got like, I think, halfway to the speed of sound. So yeah, it's pretty impressive. And the thing was, you had to get to the fastest speed and then stop without crashing.
Yeah.
That's pretty. It's kind of exciting. It's like, is this thing gonna, you know, what speed is it gonna get up to? Are they gonna slam the brakes on in time, or is it gonna hit the crash barrier at the end? So it's pretty fun. And then we kind of got to we put that on pause, and now we're doing tunneling competitions.
Nice. Change that. Yeah, that technology has not changed that much in a century.
No, honestly, I think we're gonna, you know, I mean, for, I don't know, 5 or 7 years, for a long time I was like, people ask me, what opportunities do you see? I said tunneling, and they would think I was joking, but I think this is the way to solve traffic in congested cities. Now, almost every major city is congested. So, and with, as autonomy gets better and better, and you have robotaxis and everything, the robotaxis will be cheaper than a bus or subway, and people will want it, and it'll take you point to point, you know, even when it's like raining and snow, and it's, you know, so it's going to be better also, I think, for, you know, from a public health standpoint, like if there's another pandemic, and, you know, how do you get around, you know? It's like you know, it's just difficult to go in crowded spaces. So anyway, so I think tunnels are going to be really important in the future for relieving congestion in cities. So you know, I hope others start tunneling companies, and just improve tunneling technology. And you can have like these warp tunnels just going all the way through this, you know, 3D, like multiple levels. And we're the first operational one in Vegas. That's it's going to go into operation, I think, in a few months.
I just want to hit on, there are 4 categories that teams can put their approaches forward. First is direct air capture. Pull it out of the air. Any comment on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, you can certainly pull it out. There's lots of ways to get carbon out of the air.
Yeah.
You can absorb it many different ways.
Yeah. Category 2 is oceans, sort of algae, kelp, plankton. A lot of CO2 in the oceans. People don't realize that. Mm-hmm. Category 3, land. Trees. I mean, Mark Benioff has, you know, been backing a 1 trillion trees project. I mean, where are they going to be planted? We'll find out.
Okay.
By the way, when people say that Earth is being overpopulated,
this is not true.
It's like, look out the window, and I know you and I have had this conversation that you're more worried about underpopulation of planet.
Oh yeah. Earth is going to face a massive population collapse over the next 20, 30 years. Massive.
Yeah.
And this is definitely, you know, well, civilization. You know, the question of like, is civilization going to die with a bang or a whimper? This would definitely be dying with a whimper.
Yeah, we need.
The birth rate is very low.
Yeah, it's been dropping, right? It used to be 5, 6 children per family. Globally, it's like 2.4. Below, in the U.S., it's below replacement levels.
I mean, in most of Europe, Russia, Japan, Korea, Singapore, you know, it's well below replacement.
But I would still say. Are you? I mean, when we spoke last about this, you're still a sort of abundance optimist that the world is getting better on many levels.
Yeah, I think the world is generally getting better. You know, I have some concerns about advanced AI, like you know, that's a risk. If I say like existential risks, I'd say super advanced AI is one, and probably the second biggest risk after that is population collapse.
Not asteroid impact.
No, the population collapse. The thing about demographics and birth rates, you know what's going to happen in 20 years because you know the birth rate last year. It takes like 20 years for a person to grow up.
Yeah.
So we know what the adult population is going to be 20 years from now because we know what kids were born last year. I think we have a serious issue with population collapse. That's far bigger than people realize. And you know, this the social networks and everything. The social support networks were not really set up for a high ratio of retirees to workers. So then.
Well, thank God we got robots coming in.
Yeah, the robots, exactly. We'll need those robots, but you don't want to have the youth effectively enslaved to take care of the elderly. You know, which is what would kind of happen if you have an upside down demographic pyramid.
So first of all, if you're interested in the guidelines or to register a team, go to XPRIZE.org. You can download the guidelines. Again, up until I think May 13th, we're looking for public comment. Please tell us what we could do to improve it. And then please register as a team so we can communicate with you if you're interested.
I'm looking for $100 million answers that can help change the course of human history and help heal our planet. But what's the question? In the next 100 seconds, I'm going to explain. I'm Marcus Extavor, Vice President of Energy and Climate at XPRIZE. The question is, how do we take centuries of CO2 emissions out of the air and oceans? If you've got the skills to answer that question, we'd love to hear from you today. Now, let's start with the basics. We've got to reduce our CO2 emissions and get to net zero. But net zero is not enough. We also have to go carbon negative, and we need to get there fast. That means taking CO2 that's currently in the air and oceans, removing it, and storing it for a long, long time. Do you know how to remove CO2 using the land, oceans, rocks, or even taking CO2 directly out of the air? We've got to get the CO2 from up here and locking it away down here. We know plants and trees can do this and been doing it for a long time. They're great at this, but do you know how to help plants and trees sequester that CO2 in the vegetation and soils in a way that's durable and can last for centuries? How do we use the oceans to sequester vast amounts of CO2? Kelp and seagrasses are great at this, and about 1/3 of our emissions are already in the oceans. Do you know how to remove it and sequester it safely? What about rocks and helping them remove CO2? Many rocks can do this naturally, but the process takes thousands of years on its own. Do you know how to dramatically speed that up? Now, you might already have an amazing idea in direct air capture, in soil sequestration, or tree planting or farming, or maybe kelp farming and seagrass, marine biology, ocean alkalinity enhancement, geologic sequestration, mineralization, and enhanced weathering, or maybe a technique no one's heard of before. We want your $100 million ideas. Enter the largest incentive prize in history. Visit xprize.org to find out how to register a team and get involved. Together, we can help balance Earth's carbon cycle and protect our climate for future generations. What does a $100 million answer look like? It looks like any other crazy idea. It just has to work.